25, semi-retired, feeling on top of the world. I hadn't really been sleeping for a year very well, like at all. Yeah, I ended up basically ending up in the hospital with a diagnosis of Crohn's colitis. While I'm in the hospital, bad goes to worse because I get diagnosed with like myocarditis, which is inflammation of your heart. This like flare I was having from the autoimmune expands to another major organ. So now I'm like basically flaring in two major organ systems. And then worse goes to even worse because I have a third major organ system that starts flaring up, and it's my lung. They basically just couldn't stop the inflammation. In my opinion, now connecting the dots looking backwards, I don't think I was given the right toolkit. And this is one of the other problems in healthcare. To hammer, everything's a nail. The incentives basically make it really challenging for us to get holistic care that's necessary. So in my case, they basically only gave me two options. Number one was pharmaceuticals. There's these pharmaceutical classes of drugs called biologics, and they cost like $15K a month. They're really expensive, like Humira, Remicade, and Entyvio. You probably see the commercials for them. A lot of Americans are on them. They basically tried every single one of these on me and didn't really work to stop the inflammation. Then they're like, okay, well, all we can really do now is surgery. Never once was I asked, hey, what is happening in your microbiome? Let's test that stuff. Never asked. Never once was I tested for my nutrient balances, right? My vitamin D level, I only found out after I got out of the hospital, it was like 12, right? Like that's ridiculously low. I'm there for 3 months in the hospital dealing with all this, pharmaceuticals or surgery. And I was so desperate. Imagine yourself being in the hospital for 3 months. You've lost 60 pounds. I like walk around, 160, 170 before all this. I was down to like 113. And meanwhile, this was during COVID. So I was in an ICU ward, was not allowed to have visitors. I was like trying to order supplements and stuff from Amazon and like get them shipped to the counter. And the nurses literally were like not allowed because of COVID protocol to go down and pick it up. So it was kind of, the whole thing was just a mockery. Only after I get out of the hospital and they have to remove these major organs, I now have to like get, multiple surgeries to basically cut out, half my stomach all the way down to my rectum, like permanently altering my anatomy for life. I find out that 75% of big health system revenue, 75% of the revenue comes from surgeries and pharmaceuticals. About 50% of that is like surgeries themselves, right? Which makes sense. The other 25% comes from pharmaceuticals themselves. So those like biologic drugs we talked about, they cost like $15K. The hospital's making at least 50% margin on those. You'd think that like all the money would go to the drug makers, but not really. Healthcare systems, like they have vertically integrated infusion centers, meaning like they own the place that like infuses the drug in you, so they're making a margin from that. Oftentimes they have really cheap prices through like 3 or 40B pharmacy options, or they have like kickback programs with the pharmaceutical companies. So they're actually making like considerable margin on all these drugs. So like, what does this mean? It means they're economically incentivized to want to do the treatments that are going to make them the most money. And in my case, I made them almost $2 million worth of a hospital bill from all this stuff. Now contrast that with like a holistic protocol. Maybe it would have costed like 10 to 15 grand. It was a comedy of broken incentives, and unfortunately it's led me here, but I also like to say fortunately, because anytime you deal with something that's like that traumatic, or you're faced with your own mortality, it permanently alters the lens through which you view life and you view reality. So here I am still standing. And, it's why I want to dedicate the next 10, 20, 30 years to trying to change some of this and doing it through the vehicle of the company that I recently started.
Welcome back to the Present Fathers Podcast. Our guest today is Jacob Peters. Jacob is the CEO and founder of Superpower.com, Superpower the company. So Jacob, I don't want to steal your thunder. I'll let you fully introduce yourself, but welcome to the Present Fathers Podcast. I'm very excited to have you on.
Thanks, George. Very excited to be here and talk about healthcare.
Yeah, let's definitely the revolution of healthcare, right? I think what you're doing is extremely cutting edge. I think it's going to change a lot. I'm really excited to hear what kind of the average dad out there can learn from your experience. So if you could just introduce yourself kind of at a high level and everything you're doing, and your backstory overcoming some pretty serious health issues yourself.
Yeah, happy to start. The story of my life has been one that has, for better or for worse, been marred by health challenges, all from a very early age. And something that I now believe to be true, that is still sort of, I think, stuck within frontier medical communities versus the mainstream, is that our environment has hijacked our biology. And there's this concept of like the exposome, which means the total like amount of environmental exposures that you've had throughout your life, and like how they actually affect the way your body develops and the way you biologically show up in the world. So from a very young age, I basically for as long as I can remember, I had food allergies. So I'd eat something like wheat, dairy, and I'd get this like, post-nasal drip. I'd feel kind of uncomfortable. I'd get hives. I'd get the sniffles. And like, this is something that's like very common now, right? Like I think a lot of Americans are dealing with allergies, foodborne. But come to find out, these types of allergies can oftentimes be caused by improper childhood exposures. So my parents didn't have pets growing up, so I was basically not exposed to like any of the natural microbes that like a dog or a cat might bring into the household. My dad, on the other hand, he grew up on a farm, and he basically has like never gotten sick a day in his life. And there's studies that show, children who were basically born in almost like dirtier environments, they like grew up to have immune systems that were much more robust. So I'm going to touch on like a lot of the exact kind of intricacies of how all this scientific stuff works, but I want to give like a 3,000 foot view of my backstory before I get too excited here.
Nice.
Long and short of it is I've just been marred by health challenges throughout my whole life. I had family members who were also sick and have just kind of been, up and around dealing with chronic illness. And then I eventually got into tech. So I started a software company in my early 20s after doing like a year on Wall Street as like in a quantitative finance role. First company I ever started got quite big quite fast. So we became like a multi-$100 million business by the time I was 25. Fortunate enough to exit that company, and then I started a venture capital firm to sort of support the next generation of entrepreneurs. So helping fund companies, entrepreneurs, not too dissimilar from myself, and helping them get off the ground with, a few hundred K checks into their pre-seed and seed stage rounds to get like early stage tech concepts off the ground. Unfortunately, a lot of the health challenges that I've been dealing with throughout my whole life ended up coming to a head, which is really what put me on the journey and became the catalyst for what I'm building now, which you alluded to at the beginning, which is superpower.com, a kind of next generation health platform that's seeking to bring like a different type of healthcare lens to people, to America, to dads everywhere, one that's more preventative, longevity focused, and ultimately more like performance enhancing, because that's kind of where we see the future of healthcare going. So a lot of high level ground covered in the what I just said. So I'm going to pause there because I want to keep this fun and conversational. But yeah, it's been quite a journey these past 29 years. I just turned 29. Yeah.
So could you expand just a little bit on how serious your health issues got? Because looking at your bio, it says you lost 3 major organs. So obviously some very serious issues, not just like a little deal, right? So what was that experience like? What actually happened, and how did you one, overcome it physically, but also basically near-death experience? And I assume it wasn't a very quick experience. How did you learn to handle such a scary and trying time in your life, all while running this VC firm and everything on top of that?
Yeah. So before I dive into what happened to me, I want to touch on like my framework for health. And total disclaimer, I'm not a doctor. I dropped out of med school to do finance and tech stuff. So I pre-med actually, not actual medical school. So I never finished more than like a few bio classes, which I loved. But I approached all of this more as like a patient, a technologist, and a citizen scientist, because I've unfortunately had to find my way to the edge of medicine and scientific research to connect dots that other people aren't connecting, to heal myself through all the things that I'd experienced. And my framework for health, and one way I think about it, is as follows. Your immune system is like one of the core functions that keeps you alive. It keeps tumors at bay. It kills cancer cells as soon as they mutate. Like we're getting cancer cells that pop up in our bodies every single day, but our immune system knows exactly what to do, right? Like we have foreign objects, toxins, invaders, problems, stressors, and like the systems in our body sort of know what to do. One way I think about this is almost like as if everyone had an army of 100 call it like immune system soldiers, right? Mm-hmm. And these 100 soldiers are, again, meant to be deployed to any problem that might come up. You skin your knee, the immune system's going to go and react. It's going to cause some inflammation. It's going to send like healing properties, and healing, kick off healing processes. But if we go back to this whole idea of there being a exposome that we're all exposed to throughout our life, right? Like just a big degree of environmental and chemical exposures and just, life stressors, life events. Those things can irreversibly sometimes affect the soldiers in your army. So in my case, I had these food allergies as a kid, right? And I suspect that, I had some sort of damage done to me as a young child, because when I was really little, I had all these sinus infections. And my parents, they didn't know any better. The practitioners were just giving me mouthfuls of antibiotics, right? Things like Augmentin, all the things you might get from a pediatric physician. That's just following the standard of care if you have some sort of, cold or flu. So anytime you take antibiotics like this, you're basically nuking a lot of like good microbes in your microbiome. So I suspect that basically my microbiome was like irreparably harmed, and that ended up leading to like a lot of these symptoms that I get when I eat foods. And part of the reason for that is not just the fact that you have like basically a missing population of good microbes that help like reduce inflammation in your body, but also the fact that I was dealing with something known as like intestinal permeability, which is when you eat foods, the food goes into your stomach, and your stomach kind of acts as like this protective layer against the rest of your body. Different like bacteria or food particles can actually leach from your stomach lining into the rest of your bloodstream, and then cause those immune soldiers to go and attack. And like we don't really know like exactly what causes this phenomenon, but like a lot of people in America, a lot of children now have this problem with like, it's called leaky gut or like intestinal permeability. We suspect that a lot of it could be caused by some of the things that are in baby foods or processed foods that children eat. Things called emulsifiers, which are like thickening agents that they add to everything from like juice pouches to ice creams to like oat milks and things. It's really, really bad. Carrageenan is like a very commonly named one. And because I had these food allergies as a kid, my parents were giving me like a bunch of these like meal replacement, processed foods that they thought were good for me, because it was avoiding like the wheat and the dairy that I was supposedly having this like, allergic reaction to, which maybe was caused by like, the improper microbiome population. Little did they know that probably just like caused a bunch of downstream issues in my stomach lining, and then all of a sudden I had two core problems that I was dealing with. So throughout my whole life, I'd have these like allergic responses, and I wasn't really sure why from when I'd eat things. And connecting the dots, looking backwards from what I now know about the science, this is clearly what I was dealing with. So if we connect it back to this like analogy and idea of having 100 immune system soldiers, 10 to 20 of my soldiers were just like completely being knocked out every single day, all the time, because they were dealing with this like issue that had been caused to me by my environment and my upbringing. And then anytime like you have soldiers who are down for the count in like your body's army, and then you have other things that come up, you're less resourced to be able to deal with things, right? This is sort of like how cancers and tumors and diseases and different problems in the body, I like to think, start to take hold and cause a lot of issues, is when too many soldiers are dealing with too many different types of things, right? Like if you're not drinking out of glass and using plastic, or cooking with Teflon pans, which is another really like toxic chemical that is in nonstick cookware, all these hundreds of little things, they truly add up. I swear this wasn't a prop that I had beforehand, but like this is if for anyone who can see this, otherwise if you're listening, I'm holding up brown paper towels. Most people's paper towels are white. Did you know that white paper towels are, one, covered in bleach, and two, a lot of times covered in BPA? So you want to basically use non-toxic versions of all these products, because like all these toxin exposures, they deplete your body's army. At all times, your body has to be using like 3 or 4 or 5 of these like little soldiers to deal with these toxins that like we otherwise didn't evolve in our environment to have to deal with. So this is one of the big reasons why there's so much sickness and health challenges in America, in I think the father community and the community of our children, because we don't realize that this is happening. So I wanted to just like level set with that framework and the way I think about health before I dive into like my exact health story and situation, because it's very relevant. And spoiler alert, my army had way too many fallen soldiers, and it couldn't deal with the cards that I dealt it.
Yeah, that's a great framework, and it makes a lot of sense. And just anecdotally, in my own personal experience, my wife has a thyroid problem, and we've had to do a lot of research on like what
Mine
disrupts
as well.
hormones and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, it's a massive problem. And I think back on just like the stuff we ate in the '90s and everything, and like the stuff we were exposed to as kids. I'm like, I wouldn't let my kid come within 100 meters of any of that stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just our generation was just pumped full of all kinds of crazy stuff, and I think we're just now starting to see all the ripple effects of that. So I really like that foundation. Justin, sorry, I didn't mean to kind of cut you off.
I was just gonna say, yeah, man, like between all the dyes and the preservatives and everything that we eat on a daily basis, it's so hard to get away from that, and like enriched flours and all the stuff that essentially, like you said, kills your gut biome. And it's so funny. We had Callie Means have as a guest, and Callie's big into a lot of these things and biomarkers and whatnot. And it's so funny because the food industry, oh, well, I guess it's not really funny, but the food industry is essentially causing all these problems in everybody, and then they're tied to the pharmaceutical industry, who is creating quote unquote solutions or treatments. And it's a never ending cycle, and people just are starting to finally wake up. And it's a sad thing, man, because some people it's too late. It's done so much damage to their gut biome, and that's linked to the rest of their body. I think if I remember correctly, it's the mouth and the gut are the two biggest biomes that affect literally everything else in your body. So it's just interesting that we're at where we're at, but it's good that someone like you is coming in, and hopefully, I think those soldiers are going to be biomarkers. Is that correct? Is that what you're kind of?
We'll talk about how we use super.
Yeah, let's go into that. I'm curious
we make
about
some
that.
super soldiers. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'll maybe share a bit about what happened with my health journey and how I came to.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good next point. And obviously that experience gave you such a drive, not first for yourself, I assume, but you learned a lot and realized how pervasive these problems really are. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that if you're willing to share.
Absolutely. So here's where I found myself. I'm 25, semi-retired, feeling on top of the world. Been building these businesses in my early 20s, and I had a lot of hubris because my success, so to speak, was like built on a house of cards, a house of health cards, that is. So while things on the surface had been kind of going up and to the right, the condition and state of my body had been going down and to the left, because I made the mistake that all too many, I think, ambitious dads, business owners, or just like career-driven people do, which is put your ambitions ahead of your health. And it catches up to you. So my story was I hadn't really been sleeping for, I don't know, call it like a year very well, like at all. 4 to 6 hours a night, really shitty sleep. So boom, minus 20 soldiers, right? And then not just that, you can't just think about the count of the soldiers. You have to think about, like, Justin, to your point, like how battle ready are the soldiers? Are they wielding double swords? Are they like running out of breath, right? Like, what is their energy level, right? So if we had 1,000 soldiers, each soldier has 100, kind of battle points. You have 1,000 total points, call it like 20% of mine were just like completely depleted, right? Soldiers had less energy and there were less soldiers to deal with because I wasn't taking care of myself. And then I ended up basically ending up in the hospital because I had just been pushing myself too hard. I hadn't been eating properly for months. I'd been fueling with the wrong foods, eating way too many processed foods, not nourishing my body with the things that it needed. And I ended up in the hospital with a diagnosis of Crohn's colitis. So not sure for those listening who are familiar, but George and Justin, you guys were talking about like your wife's thyroid problems. Those are generally autoimmune diseases when immune cells improperly attack a major organ system. In my case, it was improperly attacking my gut and my colon. And again, the reason for this, it's still a bit like not entirely understood, but from what I've surmised going to the edge of the literature, is that more or less like it is when you have too much, to put it overly simplistically, you have too much bad bacteria and not enough good bacteria, so the immune system has to kind of react to that. You might just be like missing total populations of, microbes that are coded to be anti-inflammatory. And then number two, you have like this really dastardly like intestinal permeability, where there's kind of these like micro pin-sized holes in your intestines, and then like that can eventually lead to ulcers or like cuts basically in your stomach. And if you think about it, food's passing through your stomach all the time. So anytime like the mirror starts to crack and like you get cuts, it's really, really hard to heal it. It's really hard for the mirror to heal itself and get back to pristine, because like you're just like constantly bombarding it with food. So then the immune system goes into haywire, and it's like a bad feedback loop. And then all of a sudden, like your mirror it's not just cracked, it basically shatters, right? And that's what like an autoimmune disease is. And so in my case, I'm dealing with this. While I'm in the hospital, the bad goes to worse, because I get diagnosed with like what's known as like myocarditis, which is inflammation of your heart. So basically the cytokine storm and the inflammation from this like flare I was having from the autoimmune leads to another major, it like expands to another major organ. So now I'm like basically flaring in two major organ systems. And then worse goes to even worse, because I have a third major organ system that starts flaring up, and it's my lung. So now like I have problems with my left lung, I have problems with my heart, and I have problems with my colon. And like that's just like a lot for a body to handle, right? I was 25 and like maybe 26 at the time, and really young and theoretically resilient, but just because I hadn't been nurturing my body in the right way, it ended up coming to a head, and they basically just couldn't stop the inflammation. Now it's funny when I say they couldn't stop the inflammation, because in my opinion, now connecting the dots looking backwards, I don't think I was given the right toolkit, unequivocally, like at all. And this is one of the other problems in healthcare, which you sort of alluded to, Justin, from Callie's story, is to hammer, everything's a nail. And unfortunately, because of the financial incentives in the healthcare world, the incentives basically make it really challenging for us to get holistic care that's necessary. So in my case, they basically only gave me two options to stop this like immune system flare, which was like almost about ready to kill me. Number one was pharmaceuticals. So there's these pharmaceutical classes of drugs called biologics. Have you guys heard of them before? Yeah. So they're basically like small molecule drugs that like target certain immune markers, and they cost like $15K a month. They're really expensive, like Humira, Remicade, and Entyvio. You probably see the commercials for them. And a lot of Americans are on them. They make a lot of money. They basically tried every single one of these on me and didn't really work to stop the inflammation. Then they're like, okay, well, all we can really do now is surgery. Never once was I like asked, hey, what is happening in your microbiome? Let's test that stuff. Never asked. Never once was I tested for my nutrient balances, right? My vitamin D level, I only found out after I got out of the hospital, it was like 12, right? Like that's ridiculously low. So my soldiers in my army were just like, completely malnourished. And all my soldiers were knocked out, right? Another problem is I had really high mercury toxicity. That's something that's like never tested for in a standard of care protocol. Yet because most people are eating way too much seafood, like sushi and stuff is a very core part of, the American diet. We're all probably getting way too much of these like toxic metals that our body did not really evolve properly to excrete, because they just weren't in our environment, right? Until like we hit mass industrialization and it was poisoning our water supplies and stuff. So boom, now 20 of my soldiers, at any time we're dealing with like this mercury level of 34. I also had parasite problem, right? Boom, that's another 6 soldiers just deployed, kind of fighting that little fight. My nutrient stores were off. Like I said, I had a nervous system that was like super out of whack. So there's this like measure called HRV, heart rate variability. You can check it on an Apple Watch. You can check it on an Oura Ring. You can check it on a Whoop. It's like becoming a bit more widely known and in vogue. There we go. Justin's got it on. And it basically is kind of like a measure that talks about how like resilient your body is to stress. And it's a good proxy for like the state of your nervous system, because your nervous system is this like invisible thing that basically is trying to always like keep you balanced between like a fight or flight or like a rest and digest state. And mine was like completely all the way over here in fight or flight. But like, again, this is a metric that was never tested, while I was in the hospital or even before I had to go through all this stuff. So there was just like, dozens of problems that I had in my body that were sucking up all of my immune system soldiers in the army, and that were like not allowing the soldiers to do their best fight. So what happened? Well, organ systems started to break. And then as soon as one thing breaks, it's like, boom, your colon is flaring. The soldiers are like, oh shit, we now have to divert the entire army to go deal with this major fire. And then all of a sudden the other fires are just like not able to be put out. And then those fires start to burn. And then another organ system's like, oh shit, boom. So that's kind of how disease, I think, like from a non sort of medical, but just more analogous point of view, like starts to manifest and things start to go haywire in the body, is your army just kind of starts fighting the wrong fights. So I'm there for 3 months in the hospital dealing with all this. And again, never once was I given any sort of like holistic root cause intervention. It was only pharmaceuticals or surgery. And I was so desperate by this time. Like imagine yourself being in the hospital for 3 months, you've lost 60 pounds. I like walk around, 160, 170 before all this. I was down to like 113. So you basically lose like over a third of your body weight. Dang. You feel like shit. And meanwhile, this is during COVID. So I was in an ICU ward, was not allowed to have visitors. I was like trying to order supplements and stuff from Amazon and like get them shipped to the counter. And the nurses literally were like not allowed because of COVID protocol to go down and pick it up. So it was kind of, the whole thing was just a mockery. So I'm desperate. And I even get, so concerned because they're saying like, we need to cut out like all your organs in your stomach to stop the inflammation because there's nothing else we can do. I found this program called like the Mayo Clinic Second Opinion. And it's, Mayo Clinic, one of the most, allegedly prestigious institutions in the US as far as healthcare goes. Turns out I've learned later that doesn't really mean anything. But they had a second opinion program where you could pay like an extra $8,000 to get a doctor on the phone, and you'd like send them your case, and they would, do 3 telehealth calls and give you like another opinion for like very complex medical decisions. And even after I went through all that, they told me the exact same recommendation as the hospital. Only after I get out of the hospital and they have to remove these major organs, I now have to like get, multiple surgeries to basically cut out, half my stomach all the way down to my rectum, like permanently altering my anatomy for life. I find out that 75% of big health system revenue, by the way, there's like 50 multi-billion-dollar health systems in the US. These are like big businesses, right? Like this is like $1 trillion worth of market cap, right? Of like big healthcare or close to it. 75% of the revenue comes from surgeries and pharmaceuticals. About 50% of that is like surgeries themselves, right? Which makes sense, right? Like you have a 15-person team, you can bill a lot of money to insurance. It's, you have to pay surgeons a lot of money. They make really good salary. And there's a lot of post-operative care, right? In my case, I had to be going back to the hospital multiple times a week for like months and months to get wound care because I had all these like major incision sites and a permanent stomach prosthetic. And it was a whole situation. The other 25% comes from pharmaceuticals themselves. So those like biologic drugs we talked about, which are like meant to, kind of modulate your immune system and make it easier for your body to deal with like inflammation. They cost like $15,000. The hospital's making at least 50% margin on those. You'd think that like all the money would go to the drug makers, but not really. Healthcare systems, like they have vertically integrated infusion centers, meaning like they own the place that like infuses the drug in you, so they're making a margin from that. Oftentimes they have really cheap prices through like 340B pharmacy options, or they have like kickback programs with the pharmaceutical companies. So they're actually making like considerable margin on all these drugs. So like, what does this mean? It means they're economically incentivized to want to do the treatments that are going to make them the most money. And in my case, I made them almost $2 million worth of a hospital bill from all this stuff, right? All the infusions, all of the like hospital stay time, and then obviously the surgery. Now contrast that with like a holistic protocol, which I only found out even like exists, after the fact and after I got out of the hospital, that maybe would have costed like 10 to 15 grand if that, to try and get my body back into shape and like, restore the number of soldiers in my army that could be like dedicated to dealing with inflammatory responses or supercharging the soldiers in my army. So it was a comedy of, broken incentives, and, unfortunately it's led me here, but I also like to say fortunately, because anytime you deal with something that's like that traumatic, or you're faced with your own mortality, it permanently alters the lens through which you view life and you view reality. So here I am still standing, and, it's why I want to dedicate the next 10, 20, 30 years to trying to change some of this and doing it through the vehicle of the company that I recently started.
Yeah, man. Dang, that's a lot to unpack, and we're very glad you made it through. Before we go like way into what's wrong in the healthcare system, I just want to tie up a couple personal things with you, kind of at the man level, before we get into kind of the bigger system stuff. But geez, and on top of COVID, like I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes. What a ridiculous time to have to be dealing with all this. I imagine there was not just a lot of fear, but probably a lot of anger, right? And, how did you, still a relatively young man, right, work through this? Like, what did you do to kind of restore your mindset and your emotional state, overcoming all of this, right? Because we may not face the same type of adversity in our own lives, those listening, but we may run into something very, very serious, right? And that the way that we adapt to hard times is really kind of what defines a person. So, what were some of the lessons you took away from this whole experience outside of kind of like the health specific stuff on, how to just stay whole mentally and spiritually and all of that?
It's a really great point. And honestly, this is something I haven't really discussed too much before. I'll admit, like it really did a number on the confidence and, my psyche. Like now every day I have to look down at my stomach for the rest of my life and, notice a hole there and change this medical apparatus. And, like it's even, this is kind of funny, but even the, the adhesive that like you have to put on, right, to like protect your stomach every day, it's toxic. I like found out that it's made of, like phthalates and all these chemicals, and like I have to wear it because like it basically keeps me alive, right? So like I'm like by default have to be poisoning myself in a little way, 5 of my soldiers, no matter what, are just dealing with this shit. So yeah, it's really tough. I think the big 2 ways I've found to get through this are like one, it's just like radical positivity. Like you just have to choose positivity no matter what, even when like the circumstances are bleak and dark. And then gratitude. So it's funny because like I was actually dating a girl at the time that all this happened. And she says to me, Jacob, like if I had to go through this, like I would probably just like commit suicide. She literally said exactly that to me, like quote. And I was like, whoa. It almost like it gave me perspective because it made me realize like how hard this was through another's eyes, right? And like I'd been, kind of choosing this like forced positivity to deal with it. But then, that's really when I started to, I think, discover gratitude. And the way I decided to look at this was, okay, I can either like, it's like the angel and devil on your shoulder. You can either look at this as like the worst thing that ever happened to you. Why me? This is unfair. This sucks. Like, this is going to kill my confidence with women. This is going to, impair my life and my ability to do normal things. Like I can't even, like go to the bathroom properly like a normal person anymore. Like this just sucked. I could have just wallowed in that, right? Wow. Like this is going to lead me on a suicidal path. On the flip side, it's like, well, actually I'm now Iron Man, right? Like have you ever seen the Iron Man movie? Like, he's got that like big hole in the middle of his chest. Like it's like the dude almost died, but then he turned himself into a robot. Like that's how I choose to view myself now. Like I'm actually, superpowered, pun intended with the company name, but like, it's like, no, I have this thing that like no one else has. So it's my little secret. And like, yeah, it keeps me alive. And like, I'm grateful. And look, if I was born 50 years before, I'd be dead. Or like, maybe we wouldn't have this technology, right? To allow people to live without a proper functioning stomach. So that's really like how I kind of decided to view it. And look, it is kind of like a fake it till you make it thing, because even though I tell myself this, sometimes it's hard, but I do really think the mind is very fallible and like you can trick it in a healthy way. You don't want to like delude yourself, into pushing things too far and then you just live in a delusion. Like you have to be still rationally tethered to, reality. But yeah, that's really, I think, what I've had to do and choose, but it still hasn't been easy. I might make it sound like, oh, he's got an inspiring story, but no, it's fucking hard.
Yeah, man. We've heard a lot of really hard stories on this show, and that seems to be a unanimous thing that we've pulled from every single guest who shares a very difficult story is you have to have gratitude. You have to practice it even through those brutal times. And just in my own experience too, leveraging that as much as I can, it really does change your perspective on life. And I do like to say too that everything is mind control, right? And you can positively mind control yourself. Like you were saying, you can kind of trick yourself in the right ways to stay on the right path, because our emotions are fleeting. They lie to us in the moment because you're feeling something super intensely, but you're missing the bigger picture and things like that. So it's just really good to hear that. And the only quick follow-up I had was, did you have like a support system of people, after kind of the initial hospital stay and everything? Did you have people around you that were playing a pretty key role in your life to help you through this time?
Yeah, actually my brother, so I was in Los Angeles at the time, and he was living in New York. He dropped his whole life. He moved to LA, went from one coast to the other. quit his job and like got a new job and moved in with me and basically became like my caretaker when I was healing from all this stuff. So yeah, he thinks him and I are always beefing. So if he listened to this, I'd probably make him be really happy. But I definitely will forever be grateful to him for that.
That's awesome. Can't beat brotherly love. Well, you had touched on something earlier that I'm actually guilty of. I work myself damn near to death. I don't sleep ever, and it's something I'm trying to prioritize. And I've been researching supplements, like magnesium and things. What are some tips and tricks you would say to fathers out there that can help them start to cope with the lack of sleep and start to get into a rhythm where they're, tracking it or taking supplements to help them sleep deeper? Like, what are some tips and tricks you may have for some of the dads out there?
Yeah, totally. And I'll just throw the disclaimer, I'm not a father yet, but I'm preparing. And, my fiance and I, so another good thing that came from all this is I ended up, finding the love of my life. And she, ironically, was the daughter of one of my doctors that I discovered after the fact. So the doctors in the health system, complete waste of time. They almost killed me. But I eventually discovered, concierge medicine, where you have these high-end doctors who, thankfully I was in a blessed position where I could afford, $1,000 an hour for a consult. And I discovered this one integrative practice in LA, and she had been basically functionally curing cancer patients with giving them, low-dose chemo stacked with a whole holistic lifestyle routine versus just blasting your cancer with chemo. And it's a much better way to support the army, right? That's trying to keep the body alive and in homeostasis. So I ended up meeting her daughter. But all that being said, we've really been optimizing our sleep and trying to maximize our nutrient stores, because what's really important is the fact that your sperm and your egg quality are actually derivative of the prior almost 9 months of lifestyle habits. So if you are exercising well, sleeping well, and eating all the right foods and perfectly supplemented, your sperm and egg quality is going to be significantly higher. And what does that mean? Well, it means that your son or daughter is going to have less mutations. It means they might have a stronger immune system. It means they might have higher IQ. It means they might have more muscle mass. It means they might be better behaved. It might mean they're more resilient to environmental toxins. The things that we do in our lives, again, this whole idea of the exposome and all the things we're exposed to. It's not just what we are exposed to in our life; it's what our parents were exposed to and our grandparents. My fiance, one of the reasons she's just as obsessed about this health stuff as me, and one of the big reasons we bonded, was that her grandmother was the victim of a hormone drug that is now banned by the FDA. And this drug basically increased the level of estrogen in birthing mothers. They thought it was a drug that was going to help with morning sickness, and no data on it. Clinical trials were very limited back then. Pharmaceutical incentives were just pushing these things through, and 500,000 women around the globe ended up having really horrible side effects. They got cancer. They had children with birth defects. So her mom, which is now my future mother-in-law and my doctor, came out deformed. And she's an amazing woman, an amazing doctor, but she walks with a noticeable hunch and has had to have multiple back surgeries, and it was all because of this hormone drug. So and then my fiance, she has some of her own hormone challenges, right, which can potentially be derivative of the fact that her grandmother had been exposed to this hormone and her mom had been. So this stuff passes through family lineage and we don't even realize it. There's this whole idea in the therapy space, which some people might think is a little bit woo-woo. I've actually gone into the science of it, so I have more of a scientific rooting for why I think it can be powerful, and it's this whole idea of generational trauma, right? Think hardships that your grandparents and parents and great-grandparents had to deal with, that actually gets kind of translated into basically your DNA and the ways that your body. This whole idea of the body keeping the score, and the way your body and organs kind of process stress or store stress. So the same concept applies, to your sleep habits then affecting your offspring, which takes it back to your question, Justin. So, I think that it's just a really important concept for all the guys out there to really just get into their heads, which is the choices we make, not only affect the financial vitality of the family, not only affect the strength of the relationship with our significant other, but they all, not just our ability to show up for our existing kids, but they also can affect our future children. Now, low-hanging fruit, sleep advice. So Again, I'm not a physician, but like I hang out with physicians all day, so I'll share some of the protocols that like we recommend through Superpower, and I'll keep it really simple. One is like the things you want to do before bed. So about 3 hours before sleep, don't exercise. It'll get your heart rate up. It'll make it way harder for your body to get into a restful state. 3 hours before bed, don't eat. 30 minutes before bed, don't look at blue light. Try to do like a, kind of recalibrating wind down routine, like journaling, getting all your thoughts out of your head on paper, doing a little bit of reading. Lights. Don't have overhead lights, 1 to 3 hours before bed. All I have in my house at home is like a little night light with like 1 watt light bulb, because overhead lights, it makes your body think that like, it's sunlight still, and your circadian rhythm is going to get messed up. So that's the first thing. The second big thing you can do for sleep is like actually what you do in the morning, and it's kind of how you start the day. So getting sunlight first 15 minutes. Don't just like blast your, eyes with blue light, or like your dopamine, neurotransmitters with your phone. Have like a bit of like a zen and peaceful morning. Also make sure if you're going to drink coffee or stimulants, you really only do it first thing in the morning, like first few hours. Anything later in the day, if you're drinking multiple cups, that will affect your sleep. Even if you think you're sleeping fine, it's not going to be nearly as restful. The third big thing you can do is optimize your sleep environment. So that's like sleeping completely dark. I wear a sleeping mask personally, like a nice, silk one. Is like $30 on Amazon. It's the best investment I ever made. I use silicone earplugs, which were also like $5 on Amazon. Keep the room really, really cool. And then take some supplements too. So I consider that part of the environment. So Justin, to your point, magnesium glycinate is a great one. Most of us aren't getting enough magnesium in our diet anyway, so like you can't go wrong with enough magnesium. L-theanine is another powerful one. It's a kind of like an amino acid that's found in green tea. And it's really powerful for promoting GABA, which is like gamma aminobutyric acid, which is a neurotransmitter that has a calming effect in the brain. So these are just like, very entry level, low hanging fruit, simple things to do. I also like CBD with no THC in it. I think it's really safe, and it helps me for certain with the calm down effect. So yeah, that's kind of my like long-winded answer of, things to think about when it comes to how lifestyle habits affect our families, as well as some tactical things to do for sleep.
I love it, man. I'm all on board with everything except for the earplugs. I don't get that luxury. I have to listen for the babies.
There you go.
So yeah, if I can jump in real quick, I do anesthesia, Jacob, and I know everything you've been through. It's brutal. So thank you for sharing that with us. Really tough journey, and I'm so glad that you found a way around the traditional medical system, because unfortunately it just doesn't give everyone the answers they need. I did want to follow up on some of your sleep stuff. I recently purchased an 8 Sleep, the Ultra 4, the brand new one, and one of the biggest things I've noticed is the heart rate variability is the biggest thing they keep hitting me with. So if I drink alcohol the night before, my HRV is garbage, and the bed says, "Hey, it looks like you drank. Your sleep quality was lower." So that's a big one, and I'm curious. The other one is sleep consistency. So it's telling me that if I go to bed at 10 o'clock and get up at 5 every morning, even if that's only 7 hours of sleep, that's more important than getting that 8 hours, but going to bed at midnight sometimes, going to bed at 2 sometimes, and getting the sleep. So consistency is the big one. And then the final one, mouth taping, has been a game changer for me. That's helped a lot. I used to snore. It's goofy. I know it's really silly, but I tape my mouth at night, and I will snore a little bit through my nose. I'll do like a kind of weird thing, but my sleep quality goes up dramatically. So I'm curious about those 3 little things, if you have any opinions.
Yeah, I do. So I have an 8 Sleep as well. And I will say the cooling effect definitely improves the sleep. So this is not a paid endorsement, but like if you can afford it, it is cool.
It is for us. You hear that? Yeah. Come sponsor us.
Yeah. We'll hit them up. I actually know the founders, so if you guys need to connect, we'll make it happen. But
nice.
Yeah, so yeah, it's great. You can also like adjust the different sides of it. So one side could be like your wife's temperature, or another side could be like your temperature. But yeah, HRV is like what I talked about earlier. It's this like good proxy for like how basically optimized are you for like dealing with stress? How stress resilient are you? And when you drink alcohol the night before, it's like you're killing your soldiers, right? So like of course you're gonna like have a lower HRV, and you're gonna have less of a stress response, and your body's gonna be less primed to deal with things, because it has to deal with like the toxin processing, right, to get this alcohol out of your system. It's the same thing with like eating before bed. Like eating before bed a few hours even, or exercising, it tanks your HRV. So HRV is like a really good measure of what I like to think of as not just like resiliency during the day, but also sleep quality at night. Like if you have high HRV, it means your sleep is like very restful, very peaceful. Your body is in this like rest and digest state versus being a little bit more excitatory. Third one was mouth tape. So mouth tape is cool. I use mouth tape. My dad has like some sleep apnea problems, which we're like working on getting a sleep apnea test. We'll like send you a little kit at Superpower. So if anyone listening wants to try that, we can find a way to hook it up. And like he's been having better results with mouth taping. So I'm a pro. You have to get the non-toxic version though, because some of them like you're basically just like leaching BPA, whatever like toxic like chemicals they're putting on the back of the adhesive into your mouth, and our skin is like super absorptive. So something I unfortunately had to do like a year ago when I started finding out about like how toxic our clothes were was I like threw out half my Lululemon and donated it, because I'm like, dang, I don't want polyester made from plastic just like on my balls or on my body all day, hyper absorbing. So now I'm basically 100% organic cotton. This, I will admit, this jacket, I'm cheating, is like polyester most likely. It doesn't feel like cotton, but like I have a shirt underneath it, right? So I have a long sleeve shirt, and like you want to like protect your skin from a lot of this stuff. So pretty much everything from like shirts, pants, underwear, socks, I'm like all linen, cotton, no polyester, and I think the little things add up, right? Like my hormones probably thank me for it.
Yeah, I was having major skin problems at work. I was wearing scrubs. I don't know what was on them, but I was having acne, all kinds of issues. Started wearing an undershirt and it went away. So it's incredible how these low quality, I don't know what kind of soaps they were using, all that kind of stuff, but it was definitely causing issues.
So we just don't know how it works yet. It's just...
Exactly. So, okay, I can't exercise for 3 hours before bed. When do you have sex? Do you do that in the morning? Like, how do you time your sex for your, listen, if it's a choice between getting laid and perfect sleep, you got to make choices here.
Well, the correct answer to that question,
some things are worth the sacrifice.
Well, the hormone release from sex is a little different.
It probably counteracts,
it does. It helps you sleep. So I want to jump in real quick and just talk about two things, actually. You talked about skin, Dustin. That's such an important thing. My son is 2 years old, and he has severe eczema, so much so that it flares up and he'll scratch and bleed it. Well, we went to, and I sell med-surg products to every type of physician there is, just to give anybody listening a background real quick. And that being said, I deal with ENTs, I deal with plastic surgeons, dermatologists, whoever. We have spent thousands of dollars on my son's skin and nothing has helped. And then the simplest thing I noticed helped one day. Our water sucks. Not here personally. It's pretty good, but we have hard water. And I noticed that because there was black mold coming off of our shower heads. And I started to put two and two together, and I was like, wait a second. My son's getting exposed to that, and I have allergies to like metals and things. So we got a filter for his bath time, and I'm telling you what, his skin has never looked so good. So little things, paying attention to stuff like that, like you were saying, that your environment, people don't think about your environment or the clothes that you wear, things like that. We use a 7th generation for all the dads out there with kids with sensitive skin. It's a fantastic detergent. It's pretty much all natural. It doesn't have all the fragrances and all that stuff. It's been great for his skin as well. But the second thing I wanted to go into, I just went blank. Sorry.
Well, I'll jump in and
George.
say, Justin, I have a friend who had the exact same story. He just
That's
had
awesome.
a son, and he was like, whoa, where's this eczema coming from? And then they got a whole house water filter, and it went away.
That's
And
what
like
we're
this-
looking at.
Yeah, and like there's no research studies in this stuff. This is like purely in the world of like anecdotal, like off the record podcast type conversations, talk to friends over dinner table. And like, we need to have more of these combos because like it is the mass poisoning. Truthfully, I don't say that to be hyperbolic. I say it because like it's true.
Yeah, man. I'm no expert on any of this, right? But I rarely ever get sick. I really have any issues, and it's mainly just because I eat like meat and rice and nothing else, and I don't wear crazy stuff and expose myself to things like that. And it's really hard nowadays. I think it's harder than it's ever been, right, in this modern age we live in. So you kind of alluded to earlier the broken incentives of the healthcare system. For the average person who maybe doesn't have access to like concierge medicine and things like that, what are some of the first things you recommend, not just dads, just anyone in general, to really start paying attention to and limiting not even if they're having issues, but just to be aware of it and preventative, because this stuff may show up 30, 40 years down the road, right? So, what are some of the things you've learned through diving into, the frontier of all this? And then I've got a couple follow-ups after that one.
Yeah, so the thing I'll say is, the future is here as far as high-end concierge medicine. It's just not evenly distributed. And that's really the problem we're trying to solve. So I think the biggest thing that anyone can do that's the lowest hanging fruit is just get a full baseline. So something interesting happens when you hit basically 30. So I'm probably right about there. Your body naturally stops producing the same amount of hormones. And your hormone production effectively just naturally declines with age. Why is this? It's because as we evolved, our lives were really brutish and short, and we would go weeks at a time without consuming food. We had to reproduce really young, or else we wouldn't carry on our genes, and then people would basically die on average at 40. So there wasn't really a reason for us to basically keep all the systems humming and gracefully growing into old age. It just wasn't a thing, right? You'd be evolutionary left behind by the younger people in the tribe. And so how do we counteract that? Because modern living obviously does allow us to gracefully age. Well, it means you basically need to know, well, what was your baseline? And then as you age, how do you make sure that things like hormone functions are not dangerously deviating from baseline? So I have a lot of guy friends who are 35, 40, 45, and they are just getting their testosterone and full hormone panels checked for the very first time. And they're always Jacob, I wish I would have started doing this 15 years ago, because then, tech didn't even really exist as much, so that's a little hard to say. But still, even knowing what was my natural baseline when I was 28 and much more real, I should basically do things now to either artificially or naturally get myself back to my prior level. So people are just completely in the dark as to what their body was when they were younger, what their health levels and different measurements were when they were more of an optimal state. So I think that's the first big thing I can recommend. It's just know exactly where your body's at. Give yourself the one, peace of mind that there's nothing dangerously wrong, and then two, give yourself full body intelligence. Because what's happening across the board is that consumers are just getting more and more empowered. This stuff no longer is gate kept by hospital systems. It's not gate kept by doctors. You can sign up to platforms like Superpower, other blood testing platforms, and find what's happening in your body now for a few $100, and it's very reasonably priced, and it gives you control. And I think that's probably the number one thing that I could say is just know what's happening in your body, be educated. You owe it to yourself, you owe it to your future self, and you owe it to your family.
I love that, man. I'm really, really excited about what you're doing here, because what I was going to say earlier is education. Not a lot of people are educated on health and what little factors can help. And Dustin with the sleep apnea or snoring, I diagnosed my dad's. Knowing the symptoms of things or having somebody like you to say, hey, this is where you're failing, and then you can piggyback other things. For instance, if you have a deviated septum and you need to be able to breathe at night, you have other doctors that you can push these folks to. So it's cool. It's exciting to see that there's somebody who's going to kind of create or shorten the gap and create bridges to get, from point A to point B for people to kind of know where their, like you said, their baseline is, and then go from there. So.
Yeah, and it's not just knowing your baseline, right? That's one piece of the equation, right? Of course, we all want to know as much about ourselves as possible. And with simple tests that, we run as an example, you can know 10 to 100x more than you'll get from a traditional GP, from insurance covered care. I think about the body as very much being a jigsaw puzzle, right? A 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle. Right. And when you go to the doctor, they're basically giving you 7 pieces of the puzzle. They're telling you a few biomarkers that are kind of useless. But tools now exist to be able to get maybe 500, 600 of those puzzle pieces. We still don't know everything about science and medicine yet, so you'll still be a little bit in the dark. And look, some of the more frontier tests that even we don't do, they're going to cost you thousands of dollars. I have, friends who have done quite well in business, and they get all this stuff. But I think there's a diminishing margin of utility where you can basically get the 80-20 of it just for maybe $200 to $1,000, which is still, not crazy outrageous. So, but that's the first piece of it, is getting as much of your jigsaw puzzle filled in as possible. But then where a lot of, I think things fall off is, it's okay, well, what do I do about it, right? Now that I know what the border looks like in my puzzle, and I know what this part of the grid looks like, what do I actually do about all this information? And if you're going to a traditional kind of mainstream physician, guess what? They're going to have a very limited toolkit of things, just like my story. They're going to have pharmaceuticals or surgery, basically, right? 80% or so of like physicians in America are employed by certain physicians associations or hospital systems that have very strict standards of care that you basically cannot deviate from as a physician. You like legally cannot, by terms of your contract, basically, because the liability or just the standard of care or the ideology, you can't even recommend like a supplement or something, because that's like not evidence-based, out of standard of care. You can't really recommend lifestyle. You're not educated in it. It's not part of the training. It's just not part of the vibe of what, is kind of, it's not a tool in your toolkit effectively, right? Mm-hmm. So you want to be going to a place where once you know 600 pieces of your puzzle, you have like 600 really good interventions that you could theoretically try. And those interventions need to be way more than just pharmacology-based, pharmaceuticals. You need lifestyle interventions. You need really good supplements. You need really good, off-label pharmaceuticals that can be good for usage in like human enhancement. So you have to go to the right place to basically get the best tools, because otherwise you're gonna have a really good map and then shitty tools. And instead you want a really good map and really good tools. So that's the way I think about it.
Can you just describe a little bit too about, like, you've touched on it a little bit with the broken incentives of the healthcare system, but it's even more than that, really, right? It's science and scientific research isn't very pure either, right? I've heard, like, for example, Dr. Andrew Huberman has talked about this extensively, how they'll do hundreds of tests, and when they finally get the one that gives them the result that the company wants, that's what they publish, and everything else is kind of thrown out. So I don't know how much of that is happening with medicine necessarily, but like we almost live in this upside down world of where there's all this power consolidated to everyone who's like controlling what is right or wrong. And I don't want to sound all like tinfoil hat here, but I think I'm healthy because I just don't go to the medical system in my own life. And ironically, like, never going to the doctor almost seems to be the right answer nowadays. So, like, what have you learned through your experience and then making this your business that were either alarming or just to help people realize how pervasive this problem is? Hey, Jacob, I think you might be muted.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Got you now. There we go.
You got me. All right. I said wow because I don't even know where to start because there's just like so many problems and genuine perversions. I think the real challenge is we have like 7 to 8 very large, like, entrenched institutions. And it's not like we're blaming one person or one company. These are just like collective capitalistic pools of like entities who, have like all these like weird intermingled incentives, and none of it is aligned with you.
BlackRock. Sorry.
Yeah, well, it's right. Like, this isn't tinfoil hat. This is just kind of how the world works in a way. There's everything from like the poor financial incentives, right, from BlackRock all the way to like pharmaceutical companies. Like, they are incentivized to get as many drugs through the FDA as possible, and as many people on those drugs as possible. They don't care if there's like, a ton of side effects that like are kind of, covered up or not really addressed in the clinical trial. They, don't care if the other 99 trials didn't show the data that they wanted, right? They just need the one. Hospital systems, same thing, right? Pharmaceuticals, surgery. It's how they make the majority of their revenue. They're all divided into specialty groups, right? Like, there's not much of an incentive to like, have holistic care. Doctors, they're paid on volume of patients most of the time in America if you're in the insurance reimbursed system. And therefore, like, you're not incentivized to spend much time with people. You're incentivized to see as many patients as possible. And like post-COVID, doctors are paid even less now, so they have to see more patients. So that it's gotten worse, right? Like, big food companies, they're incentivized to basically, get the lowest costs possible for their products, which means they're going to replace all the healthy stuff with unhealthy stuff, and they're going to put crappy stuff inside it, and they're going to put the ingredients that are going to make you most addicted. Big social media, right? They're going to tune the algorithms to make you want to like scroll through all the half naked girls and this and that, and like, so we live in this world now where there's like entire corporations of people across these like 7 to 8 big pools. I didn't even talk about agriculture and like chemical. Like, these are all huge, problematic institutions, and there's just like tens of thousands of people working at each of these companies and there's dozens of companies within each of these. So that all of a sudden you have like millions of people who are economically incentivized. They're trying to put food on the table for their families, and they're showing up to work every day to basically, make life almost worse so that they can make more money for their companies for everyone else. So it's just like, it's basically a war, an invisible war. And this is not,
broken system.
It's a broken system. It's not something to be, it's something to have your eyes open, to. And I think as soon as you start to realize that, and look, consumers are already making better choices across the board, right? Like just you talk about, you're using seventh generation. Consumers are choosing more ethical clothing companies and brands that, seem to align with what they want. Consumers are choosing private, healthcare platforms like Superpower to opt out of the system. Like George, it's now like, a feature, not a bug, to not have a primary care doctor because you're probably going to do more harm than good. So, yeah, I think the biggest overarching takeaway is that like a lot is broken, and consumers just need to like educate themselves, take the time to listen to podcasts like these, take the time to just like, understand how this stuff really works, and I think a little bit deeper about, the world that we're in, because nothing, I think, as I've learned, is really what meets the eye, and there's always a deeper rabbit hole and a reason why someone's doing what they're doing, a reason why someone's saying what they're saying. And you don't want to become so cynical where like you have this like, cynical neurosis and you just think everyone's out to get you and you're paranoid. But I think healthy skepticism is just like almost a necessity to thrive in modern living.
Yeah, I did want to follow up real quick. Your doctor wants to help you, and there are some misaligned financial incentives, but you should absolutely go see your doctor periodically, especially if you're not doing concierge medicine or doing other things to help yourself. Please go see your doctor. And if your belly hurts or if you've been in a car accident, go to the hospital. They will help you. So please don't take this message the wrong way. Yeah. There are a lot of good doctors out there that will help. There's a lot of problems as well. I saw my primary care recently, and the advice they gave me was not great. And when I asked for a total and a free testosterone panel, they looked at me like I had 3 heads. Like, why are you doing that? And I said, because I'm 40 and I want to know. So there's a lot of issues for sure. But at the same time, there are many people who have health problems that the basics can be helped and diagnosed by your doctor. And it's not going to be perfect. Go get a second opinion. Go talk to, look at other sources. But please don't totally avoid the medical system. That's not a good idea.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. I think Callie and a few others have said it best. Acute care is what you specialize in physician care. Chronic is going to be very hard, and finding the right person for your health and your needs, and knowing that you can trust them, because there are a lot of cowboys out there who shoot from the hip and they don't care. And then there are the ones who can help people, like Jacob, and who like, oh, you should be, eating ginger every day. You should be doing apple cider vinegar for your gut health. You should be doing this. Like, there are ways to like counteract things preemptively, like prebiotics. Like, nobody seems to know about those. It's like, come on, man. Like, just little things like that. Just educating people, like I said. And so, yeah, I would say definitely for acute issues, 100% see a physician. Otherwise, when it comes to chronic issues, you're going to need to try to find the right person that is not just going to throw drugs at you, or who's going to, take in all the information that you have to offer, and you paying attention and making you take notes as to what's going on in your life, so that they can kind of think, is this environmental? Is this something internal? Whatever the case may be. So,
Jacob, I want to give you time to tell us in a little bit more detail what Superpower really is, and kind of what's next for that, and what can people look forward to if they want to start working with you guys.
Yeah, thanks for the tee up, and I'm gonna jump in a few here, so I'll be brief. But the big idea is we're building the kind of doctor's clinic of the future. So all the things that you wish your doctor was able to do, like order a free testosterone test, or prescribe like the best off-label pharmaceuticals, or recommend like a holistic supplement treatment protocol, or help you get like your lifestyle in order. We basically do. So it starts with like full body intelligence. So we make it as easy as possible to see everything that's happening in your body. Depending on your budget, we can test a little bit or we can test a lot. That's everything from like full hormones, thyroid, environmental toxins. A lot of people like love knowing the levels of like phthalates and PFAs and microplastics and pesticides and things in their urine, to different heavy metals, We also have like a network of calcium scan clinics that we send people to across the U.S. So that's a really important thing that everyone over 35 should be getting, because you just don't want to, be surprised by a heart attack and having calcification in your arteries. And it's a really cheap, like $150 test. So we take care of all the logistics and make it easy to get these types of things done. And then we work with you. So you get like a full, clinician team and longevity trained nutritionists that are actually covered by a lot of major insurers. So it's not even that high cost in order to kind of, play and work within our ecosystem. So yeah, we're just trying to make health easy and put it on autopilot, because there's, again, a lot of research and thousands of hours you'd have to do on your own to try to figure all this out, or you'd have to go to dozens of different places and point solutions. We've tried to put it all together, make it easy, and then make it, even cool and fun, because I think the best companies are also ones that make you feel like you're actually joining something like a movement and a community, and aren't just like a sterile brand, which unfortunately the healthcare industry has just never had, right? Or has only had, it's never had a Nike before, and that's part of the thing we're doing with Superpower. So yeah, excited to get you guys on, and I appreciate you having me. This has been a really fun convo, and look forward to definitely keeping in touch.
Yeah, Jacob, thank you so much for sharing your story and helping to educate those of us out there so that we can live healthier and better lives, not just for ourselves, but for our families as well. Where can people connect with you outside of Superpower itself if they want to follow you personally?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. So at J__CUB. It's like Jacob on Twitter.
All right. I'll make sure I post that in the description for this.
I have a pinned tweet of my sleep stack that went mega viral. So that's my most multi-million view tweet. So if you want to find all the things that I'm doing to sleep max, then you can check out my Twitter.
Very cool. All right, Jacob, any closing thoughts for the audience?
I just appreciate you guys listening, and stay healthy.
We will definitely work on staying healthy. All right, dads, educate yourself, educate your families, take care of them. Let's get climbing that mountain of fatherhood. We will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.